Hello quilters! Today I'm going to show you how to make the first of our 12-month series of rulering blocks. This is what I call a plaid block, which is really just a modified crosshatch. It's really good for beginners, and it's also good practice to get you working with those lines on your rulers and making sure that you're lined up nice and straight every time. So I will also be using the Westerly ruler that is a 12-inch arc, so it's straight on one side, it's got the arc on the other. I am going to be using the straight side today, and I have put handy grip on my ruler. It comes with some kind of drawer liner material in the Westerly ruler packs, but I prefer handy grip, especially for beginners, to give you a real nice solid grip on your fabric. So you will use the ruler itself to be moving the fabric along. I also have a nice large sew steady table here, which is a great working surface, nice and flat, flushed up with my machine bed here. I've got my number 72 ruler foot on, and of course I've got my slider mat. So I think we're ready to start quilting. Okay, we're ready to get started rulering here. So you can see I have marked a 8.5-inch block, and all the way around, just the outside border here. That's going to be my finished size. So I know that whenever I travel around on this line, that will be in the seam allowance when I'm finished. So that's a nice forgiving area. So we'll start in the corner. I have already done a tension check, so if you have not done that prior to this, please stop and do a quick tension check before we get started. So first off, I'm going to put my needle or my foot down, and then if you have a Bernina, you can set your heel kick on some of the machines to do a needle down, and then a needle up, holding that top thread and pulling your bobbin up through. Now I'm going to take, holding my tails, just take several stitches to get locked in, and then I'm going to quickly pick my needle up and my foot up to get my tails down to the bottom here where I want them to be. Okay, coming back down in the same place. First row of stitching I'm going to do, I want to travel to my right about a 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to come across the top. And I know that from my needle to the edge of my foot is a 1/4 inch, so I can kind of use that as an eye gauge. And then I'm going to be taking my Westerly ruler, and if you can see on my fingers there's lines on here. I want to put that first white line onto the black line I have marked on my edge of my quilt block here. And I'm not quite snugged up to my foot there, so I'm going to take one step back into my ruler, and then I'm going to sew down towards me. Keeping in mind to be moving at a steady speed and running the needle at a steady speed so that we get nice even stitches. As you get more confident, you can go a little faster. Of course, it's never a bad idea to stop and reposition. As you can see, I can't make the whole run with my ruler, so I have to slide it down, lining up again. And I'm going to stop when I get to that other edge. Travel over another 1/2 inch. And when you're lining up with your stitching line, you might find it's easy to get up above your project and really look down on the ruler. Make sure you're lined up nice and straight. As you see, I went a little too far again. That's all right. It's going to be in the seam allowance. Now we're ready to go back up. Now you can see how I'm holding the ruler as I go along with 1 or 2 fingers off, but most of my hand is on the ruler itself. I'm using that handy grip on the bottom to really push that fabric for me. And then I just have my right hand as a guide, just helping keep the rest of the fabric flowing nice and smooth. Of course, with a block this size, it's pretty easy, especially with my nice slider mat underneath. And stop. Now this time, I've got 2 1/2-inch lines. Now I want to go 1 inch. So I'm going to go quite a ways down. And I will be using the 3rd white line on my Westerly ruler. Need to go just 1 more stitch till I'm lined up where I like it, and come back down. You will find it's a little easier to work with your fabric actually pulling towards you. So when I go the opposite direction, it's a little easier when you're starting out, but it's a little difficult to wrap your mind around if you're not used to free motion quilting, that I can go in any direction. So I'm going to come over 1/2 inch this time, using that first line to line up. And just to show you, I can even go it at an angle if it's easier for you to see what I'm doing here. And I would encourage you to practice going at different angles, different directions as you get started. It'll make your life a lot easier when you get a big quilt on here and you're not able to just turn it around and go the direction that you want. So I'm sliding my ruler up, making sure I'm lined up again, and back over 1/2 inch. Now keep in mind as well that when you're a beginner, your lines may not be perfect. Do not spend a bunch of time ripping out seams. This is just for practice, and there's only one way to get better. So just go with the flow, keep a positive attitude, and I guarantee if you stick with it, it will become easier and you will become better. If you spend all your time ripping out stitches, you only get good at ripping out stitches. We want to learn how to be excellent rulerists. You might notice I was speeding up on that run a little bit. It might be a good idea if your machine has a speed control to set that so that the top end is where you're comfortable, so that you know you can put your foot down and just go that nice consistent speed. So you saw I went 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch here, and now I'm back to 1/2 inch again. I'm going to just do 1/2 inch this time. And then we're going to start working back from the other side, back towards the middle. And the reason I want to do that is because if there's any way my lines are getting off just a little bit, and I'm constantly referencing off the last stitching line that I did, I might not have this nice half-inch lines on the edge, and you will notice that. So if I bring my lines into the middle, I can kind of meld any imperfections a little bit better. So using the edge of my block, I'm just going to go ahead and travel over. If you feel more comfortable using your ruler to get over here, you can. And line up on the edge. And start working from this side. Alright, so as I'm sewing along here, you might notice that I'm getting a little bit of a rounded corner when I'm coming across here. I'm not too worried because it's going to be in the seam allowance, but that's a good indication that my top tension is too high because it's pulling that bobbin thread up and over. So I went ahead and made another minor adjustment on my tension. And I can note that for next time, if I'm going to use this same thread and same quilt combination, so I won't have to do any adjusting midway through. Okay, so this is why we wanted to come in from this side. So we know that we need an inch gap and a ½ inch line over here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do the other ½ inch, because that will be more obvious if it's off than the inch. But I'm going to check and see where I am. And I'm pretty much dead on both ways I go. But just to be safe, I'm going to go down this side. Okay, so that whole way is done. Now I need to travel around and go the other opposite direction. Once again, because this quilt sandwich is so small, I can turn it as I did just then, or I can test my skills here, lining up again that first line on that outer edge and do some back and forth stitching. If you've done ruler work before, I would definitely encourage you to challenge yourself and do this second set of stitching left to right instead of front and back. And again, this way we will still want to only go about halfway across, 7 lines down, and then come back at it from the other side, just in case our lines get a little off. We all know it can happen. You'll notice I'm also holding the ruler a little bit differently when I go this way. So whatever's comfortable, just make sure that you're in control. finished up here on our block. And I just wanted to remind you that if you don't like your stitches as tight as I have been doing mine, you don't have to do that. Get a look that appeals to you. But I would recommend that it's easier to hit your points and stop right on a line if you have littler stitches rather than larger ones. So you might find yourself only needing a half a stitch to get to that very next line. Straight lines are wonderful. They are the basis of most of the modern quilt look today. And I thought I was falling in love with my walking foot, and I would love to use my walking foot on this project. However, if it was any bigger, I would not be able to turn and use my walking foot like I would want to on a small project like this. That's why it's good to teach yourself the basics on a small, manageable project. And then when you go to do it on a larger one, it won't seem so intimidating. So I'm going to take one stitch over, just again checking that spacing. And this time it came out just a hair wide. So I'm going to kind of aim for somewhere in the middle. Okay, so now we're all done with our plaid crosshatch. So what we want to do first is needle up, foot up, grab our string and hold it in a loop, come back down right on where we stopped stitching, needle down and needle back up, foot up permanently, and then we can use the loop and make another loop kind of from the needle to work that bobbin thread up. You see the two loops there. And you'll want to bring it up about 3 or 4 inches if you were going to tie it in. Now in this case I'm just going to cut it off because both of my tails are going to be in my seam allowance, so they'll be sewn over. So we have just concluded our first ruler block, and you'll notice what I did. There's the back. It's kind of fun on a print. What I did is I just made mine a small little trivet. I'm going to put a grommet in the corner and keep my blocks in kind of a ring fashion so I can flip through them and reference them for future projects and see what might spark my interest for motivation for another ruler project. You can obviously keep them as just blocks and make them into a quilt with a quilt as you go type style, which you'll use stripping to connect them later, or you can just leave it as is and decide later. Thanks for joining us.